Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin and why I think we could be seeing a little bit of a trap being set up here, because overall what we're seeing in the market, in my opinion, looks pretty good. However, I do think there's a lot of people who are a little bit concerned about what's been going on in the wider market. I think this is causing a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of fear about, could this time be different? Is alt season canceled? A lot of that type of stuff. And so one thing that I just did want to say before we kind of jump into Bitcoin specifically regarding alt season is that we always need to remember that things that we expect to happen don't happen because we expect them to happen, right? So for example, the Great Depression didn't just happen because everybody expected it. It happened for exactly the opposite reason. Nobody expected it, right? And so I think that makes a lot of sense when we think about why, right? I mean, if everybody were expecting it to happen, then everybody would try and front run it, and then that's why it would never happen, is because all these people are trying to front run it, that it essentially would just never end up materializing. What we're seeing here, I think, is kind of exactly the opposite, right? People are starting to get scared. Conviction is being tested. A lot of this type of stuff is happening, and so now this does maybe potentially open the door for us to see some level of alt season. I'm not going to say it's going to be explosive. Right now, I think Bitcoin is still running the show. Bitcoin's looking really strong. We've seen people talking about why maybe Bitcoin is topped, a lot of that type of stuff. I'm not so sure that has actually happened yet, and so we're going to talk about why that could be. Anyway, let's go on ahead. We'll start diving into the charts. We'll take a quick look at kind of what we're seeing here. So first off, we're going to be looking at Bitcoin dominance. As we can see from Bitcoin dominance, we were kind of consolidating on the chart a little bit. We have broken out. We had been seeing, obviously the highest high that we'd seen basically since like 2021 or 2022, something like that, basically before like the crazy alt season of 2021, 2022-ish, the last cycle happened, and we started to see this come down. And so I think a lot of people are getting excited because this trend line's been broken. The trend is now moving to the downside. And obviously that is not totally the case yet. We have seen a little bit of a trend line coming to the upside here. There is the possibility, now this is what we need to figure out, because there is the possibility that if we come back up and make a new higher high, then, obviously we're still in Bitcoin season. We're going to be running, Bitcoin's going to be continuing to make higher highs, a lot of that type of stuff. But maybe there is the possibility that we come up, maybe not even getting quite to the recent high, but then we continue the way back down. This, in my opinion, would still kind of signal a trend change, right? Because we're still seeing lower highs. That means we are on our way to the downside. Now, it may not be as vertical as what we saw in the last bull run, but it still would be a move to the downside, right? However, I just don't think that we've seen Bitcoin top yet. And so if we haven't seen Bitcoin top yet, I do think there is the possibility that we continue to see this run to the upside. Maybe we hit 65%, maybe even hit like 67, 68%. Hard to say for certain. But if we do see Bitcoin run, and honestly, I think that the higher we see Bitcoin go, potentially even get back up to like 70%. I do think the higher the Bitcoin runs, obviously the more money that will be made, the higher price Bitcoin will go to, and the more excited people will be. And then that's when we start to see the move back to the downside. At least in my opinion, that's kind of what we're seeing. Let's actually turn off some of this stuff so we can take a look at some other things. But that's kind of what we're looking at here. If we move this back to the weekly, I want to kind of compare and contrast this to what we saw from the last bull run. So if we zoom out, we'll kind of just get a very, very large picture of what was going on here. So we can see, obviously, Bitcoin dominance goes up, 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 up. We see in 2019, it actually kind of like reach a peak. And then we have a little bit of like that DeFi summer type of situation. And then again, we see Bitcoin go up, 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 up. And then in 2020, that's when we start to see things fall off because we start to head into that alt season. And so here, this is when we see that really like precipitous fall off. Again, we're looking at weeklies here, right? So this, like, the beginning was December 28th of 2020, and this kind of peaks at the bottom, at least on that rundown, in May. So this was like a 5-month ordeal where we saw this happening. We only got about 2 or 3 weeks here, right? So very, very minimal. But if we look, we could see, we top, we come back down, we come back up, and then we start coming back down, and then we come all the way back up. Like, this was a multiple year event, right? And so there's the possibility that we see something similar, and maybe like we're at this piece, and now we have to continue to watch this happen, right? So we may go into like a little bit of a mini alt season, and then we'll see alts crash. People say, oh, alts are over, it's done, that was it. And then we see, Bitcoin come all the way back up for Bitcoin dominance. And then maybe we see something similar. Usually things don't happen twice the same exact way. But I do think, looking towards the past, we can see multiple week periods where Bitcoin dominance continues to go down, but then ultimately does continue to go back to the upside. Same thing here. We could have said, oh, it's peaked. Oh, okay, yep, we're still in a downtrend. Yep, the trend's confirmed. Wait, no, it's not. Right? So there is the possibility that, we've seen this happen plenty of times in the past. Bitcoin dominance being very volatile at multiple times in the previous and more distant past as well. So I think this is very important to look at and see kind of how we're viewing this, because right now these trend changes have overall been relatively minimal. Obviously we've seen some decent alt runs here and there, but overall haven't seen any very precipitous moves like we have at least in the past. Who's to say, right? This time truly could be different. I'm not going to say that it can't be, but we haven't seen any of the moves that we would expect out of an alt season. So that either means that one, it's not here yet, or two, maybe it's not going to come, right? So moving on, I want to take a quick look at the Bitcoin chart, because we can see something fairly similar if we look at the daily. It's just been kind of chopping around. There hasn't been a whole lot going on here, and I think this is kind of by design, right? Because if we look, we can see a pretty strong pattern forming here for Bitcoin. Go figure, right? So we can see, chopping. This kind of moves up, moves down, moves up, but overall it's a general period of not really doing a whole lot. And we can even see here, kind of chops around, breaks, chops around, does a little bit of a fake out, breaks, chops around, breaks, chops around, breaks down actually here, chops around. Then here we start to see a reasonable start of the run to the upside, right? Run to the upside. And then we see here from about December till about January, this is about a month's long period where we're just kind of chopping around, not really doing anything. Again, another really strong run to the upside. Here we peak in about March, and then we go all the way until probably about end of October when we're in this descending channel. And then we see this descending channel break. Obviously we've seen a really, really strong and nice run to the upside. Now if we look a little bit closer, we're going to start to see something fairly similar here, where this is just kind of chopping around. We are seeing a little bit of this kind of trending to the upside. It's slow, but we're seeing a little bit of a trend to the upside here. Obviously higher highs are being made, not higher lows being established per se. It's actually, we're getting some lower lows here and there, but we are overall kind of just range bound within this area, getting a couple higher highs and actually a couple lower lows as well, as we kind of work through it. But I think what we're trying to do here, or what we're seeing, is just a bunch of chopping around, trying to get people to be bored, get frustrated, liquidated, go away, leave, and then eventually we will see that probably break and move to the next upside there. And so that, I hope it's fairly clear to see that, it could be something like this where we saw a move of something happening in about 1 to 2 months, or it could be something that happens in 6 to 8 months. Very, very hard to say. There's a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different things that could be happening here. Even same thing, if we look at the bear market here, we did not see a whole lot happening on Bitcoin from June of 2022 until January of 2023. This is another 7-month period where, yes, price did trend down overall, but realistically not a whole lot of anything was happening one direction or the other. And then we start to see some of this climb back to the upside. So I do think it's very possible that we still see something similar where, continue chop around, eventually have a break, and then maybe we see a run fairly quickly up to 140, 150, 160. And then it kind of depends from there, right? Are we going to continue to kind of chop around here? Maybe we even see a further run up to 200, 240, 250. Really, really hard to say. But that is kind of the pattern that it's been following. And until we see a trend break, I don't think we're probably going to see anything too different going on here. So now moving on, if you are interested in trading Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, anything like that, I do have that link to BTCC in the description below. They are doing the 10% bonus on first-time deposits if that is something you're interested in. They do also have the extra trading bonuses up to $10,055 per user. So really, really good deals. BTCC's throwing a whole bunch of money at you to get you to sign up and maybe give a new exchange a try. So if that's something you're interested in, like I said, I've got the link in the description below with all these sign-up rewards. No VPN or KYC necessary if that is something that is important to you. Now, moving on, I want to take a quick look at the rainbow halving chart because we can see a couple of different and interesting things. So obviously right here, we've got our price, sitting just over 100,000. We're sitting in about the green zone, which means not like the maximum low that we could be, but we're kind of we're still pretty low, right? Obviously middle, that gets us into I would say maybe fair price, we could say. Orange is a little bit overblown, and then red's like kind of way overblown, right? So we can see in the past, there's only been a couple of times that we've actually gotten into red. It actually does just look like the 2017 was the only time when we've gotten into there. Maybe we just barely at a couple points in here got over. It doesn't look like, yeah, actually there's a tiny point right there where we got into red. So, but realistically, I'm not expecting to see us into red right now. That would be at, over 240,000. I suppose it's possible if, a lot of governments start getting in and buying up all the Bitcoin, then potentially we do see that happen. I just don't think that that's probably super realistic. I think, we probably get into the yellow that's above 120. Getting into orange would be above 170. That starts to seem like a little bit of a tougher ask. Maybe we could just barely kind of peek into the orange and then come back out. That's at least kind of my bias on what we're seeing. But I did want to kind of look at how Bitcoin's been trending over time. Because as you notice on the thumbnail, we talk about $500,000 Bitcoin in 2030. All right. And this is something where it's like, could this realistically happen? Of course it could, right? I mean, if we look at the green, the top end of the green here is 550,000, and the absolute lowest is 310,000, which is 3x where we're sitting here. So, obviously nothing that I say is investment advice. You need to make your own decisions. You may not believe in these Bitcoin rainbow charts or anything like that at all. But what we are seeing here is that it has generally followed this trend over time. And if we do make it out to 2030, we can see, even in the green, we don't even have to get to way oversold for us or way overbought for us to see any crazy numbers. I mean, if we get above the yellow, then we're going to be seeing over a $700,000 Bitcoin. So potentially some really wild numbers coming here in the future. And I think that's overall what we're seeing kind of people generally adopting Bitcoin as, is a store of value. And a store of value usually goes up over time because it is scarce. And so it makes sense to use it as a place to hold, because it essentially is staying fixed against an otherwise inflating currency. So the price of the Bitcoin is only going up because the currency is inflating, not because the Bitcoin itself is getting more valuable. It's the same Bitcoin that it was all this time. It's just more valuable because of the relative devaluation of the other currency. Now, the last thing I want to take a look at here is the Bitcoin price temperature. The Bitcoin price temperature, in my opinion, is important, is because what we can see in the past, we've seen price temperature get all the way up here, like into over the 9s, but realistically, like we've seen between 6 and 7 in each of the previous bull runs that we have seen. So again, we are starting to see a little bit of some lower lows. Again, we don't have many points to compare to here, but we are seeing a little bit of some lower lows coming in here. So as I have mentioned, we did see that max high here at just above 7, and we saw the max high here about 9.5. So maybe we come down a couple more and we only end up at the 5, 5.5, maybe even the 6 range. So what that would mean is we've really only seen about 3.5. So even if we're only to hit 5, which is again lower than what we saw in all of the previous bull runs, but even if we were to see that just due to some diminishing returns over time, we still have a ways to go, right? I mean, we are definitely not anywhere close to Bitcoin price temperature peaking based on historical patterns, of course, right? We have seen a relative upswing compared to some of the lows that we saw where we were getting even into the negatives here. But that's not to say that, that this is the top, or maybe it's on the way up. Hard to say for sure. But what we can see is, we have started to see some of these trends, particularly in this 2017 bull run. It kind of came up a little bit over time. Same thing here. We kind of had this mid peak in 2019. And then here it just kind of shot up and then shot down. So what we are seeing here is this is a little bit of a slower burn. And I think that's kind of what a lot of people are potentially coming to terms with this bull market, is if we do see kind of a bull market from the past, it appears like it's going to maybe be a little bit more of a slow burn. So, maybe this is one that happens over the course of a year or two, and maybe it's a market that never really sees a blow off top. And if that's the case, that's not necessarily the end of the world, right? Because usually what happens when a blow off top is you have kind of the catastrophic massive correction on the other side, right? And so if you don't have that blow off top, you probably don't have that massive correction either, which you know, there's a silver lining to everything. And so what we are seeing here is I don't think that we have seen Bitcoin price top yet, just because the price temperature hasn't gone too crazy. But again, you know, price temperature is generally measured about how quickly the price is appreciating. So if we don't see any of that like sort of parabolic run with Bitcoin or anything like that, then maybe we don't see that, right? So very hard to say for certain, but I think based on like some of the historical indicators that we are looking at and what we have been looking at on this channel for months now, it does look like things are looking pretty good overall, I would say. So just something to consider. Like I said, nothing that I say is financial advice, but as I was saying, like, you know, we can never know for sure. And so, you know, I always want to be prepared for all outcomes. I want to be prepared for the outcome of an alt season not happening. I want to be prepared for an outcome of Bitcoin hitting 250K. I want to be, you know, I'm prepared for an altcoin or an outcome somewhere in the middle of those two, right? I mean, yeah, we kind of need to be flexible and adjust to whatever type of, you know, situation gets thrown our way. So that's kind of what I'm focused on right now. Hopefully you found the information in this video as well and kind of informative to help you kind of form that sort of view. Also, like I say, nothing is financial advice, but hopefully it is instructive for maybe giving you some additional places to do some of your own research, look into some stats that could, you know, maybe there's something that I'm not even thinking about here, and you can go out, you know, and find a key piece of evidence or a key piece of context that could actually help, you know, further down the field. So anyway, that's, you know, that's kind of a little bit what we're looking at here. Hopefully you did find it useful. Like I said, also please leave me a comment in the comment section below if you have any thoughts, feelings, comments, whatever. I do try to read and respond to all of those. So if you have anything you want me to see, that'd be a great way to do it. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.